What Christmas tradition meant. Someone wouldn't see the new year. Every Christmas Eve, my family would find a homeless man outside the Pine Street shelter. Dad would pull up in his cleanest shirt, Mom would step out looking like a church lady, and they'd scan the crowd for the right person. Someone alone, someone who looked beaten down enough to say yes to anything, someone who wouldn't be missed if they didn't come back for a few hours. They'd offer him dinner, warmth, and $100. They always said 100 to get them in their car. I grew up thinking this was charity, that we were good people, opening our home to the less fortunate. Mom would spend all day cooking, turkey, ham, every side dish you could imagine. The good china came out. The house smelled like rosemary and brown butter. By age 7, I was assigned to set the table, making sure the homeless man's place setting was perfect. The fork placement mattered, Mom said. Everything had to be exact. What happened next was always the same. The man would arrive, usually clutching a backpack with everything he owned, often shaking, sometimes from cold, sometimes from withdrawal, sometimes from fear. They'd always look confused by how nice everything was, how normal we seemed. Dad would take their coat, hang it up carefully. Mom would offer them the good soap to wash up. For the first hour, it was perfect. We'd chat about the weather, about football, about nothing. The man would start to relax, start to smile. That's when Dad would give the signal. He'd tap his wine glass 3 times with his wedding ring. Time for grace, he'd announce. And that's when everything shifted. Because our grace wasn't a prayer. It was what my family called the confession. The homeless man had to stand up and confess every sin, every failure, every moment that led them to the streets. If they refused, no money. If they stopped, no money. If they cried too hard to continue, no money. My grandfather started it 40 years ago, said it was about earning redemption through humiliation. By the time I was 13, I'd watched 6 different men break down at our dinner table. Harold, who sobbed about losing his daughter to foster care. Big Jim, whose hands shook as he admitted to stealing from his mother before she died. Francisco, who could barely speak English but understood enough to know what we wanted. Each year got worse. My older brother started recording them on his phone. My cousins would ask invasive questions. Did you ever sell your body? Have you hurt anyone? Why don't your kids talk to you? The man from when I was 15 still haunts me. Samuel. He was young, maybe 25. With cigarette burns on his neck he tried to hide with a dirty scarf. When Dad tapped the glass, Samuel stood up like he'd been through this before. Different house, same game. You want me to degrade myself for money? He said quietly. I get it. I'll do it. But can the kids leave the room? Dad laughed. Said the children needed to learn about consequences. Samuel looked right at me when he started talking. About foster homes where awful things happened. About self-medicating with whatever he could find. About the assault that happened last week under the bridge. My Aunt Martha was taking notes like it was a sociology lecture. When Samuel finished, my family applauded. Dad slid a 20 across the table. That's it? Samuel asked. You said 100? That was before we knew what kind of man you really were, Dad responded. Samuel didn't argue. Just took the 20 and asked if he could take some leftovers. Mom packed him 2 sandwiches. No turkey, though. That was for family only. But when I was 17, I found out Samuel had died. Froze to death behind a dumpster 3 blocks from our house, 2 weeks after our dinner. I saw it in the newspaper at school. The photo showed him wearing the same scarf. The article said he'd been trying to get into a warming center but didn't have the $25 entry fee. $5 short of what my family gave him for his humiliation. I threw up in the school bathroom. Then I did something I'd never done before. I went to the Pine Street shelter myself. The workers there knew about my family. Turns out we were infamous. The Christmas vultures, they called us. Every year, men would come back traumatized. $100 richer, but somehow worse off. The shelter had tried calling the cops, but technically nothing illegal was happening. Just cruel. December 23rd, I decided to warn whoever they picked. I waited outside Pine Street at 3:45 before my family arrived. But then I saw something that made my blood freeze. My parents were already there, earlier than ever. And they weren't alone. My mom was talking to someone I recognized. Matt, from my shift at McDonald's. He'd been living in his car for 2 months after his apartment burned down. He wasn't even at the shelter. They'd found him at his usual spot by the dumpsters where we threw out the old food. He was wearing his uniform under his coat. No, I said, running over. Matt, don't go with them. My parents' faces went from confusion to rage. Sweetie, Mom said through clenched teeth, what are you doing here? I work with him. I turned to Matt. Don't do this. I'll give you $20 right now. 30. Whatever you need. Matt looked between us, confused. Your daughter is very generous, he said to my parents. But they already offered 200. I'm going with them. I stood frozen on the curb watching Matt's hand rest on the car door handle, his tired face lighting up at whatever promises my parents were feeding him. The December cold bit through my jacket, but sweat ran down my back, my heart hammering so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Matt wore his McDonald's uniform under his coat, the same one he'd been wearing when I saw him eating day-old fries in the break room last week. My parents stood on either side of him like they were escorting royalty, their faces warm and concerned, the perfect picture of charity. I had maybe 60 seconds before he got in that car, and it was too late to stop what would happen next. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I rushed forward and grabbed Matt's arm, the words coming out in a rush. Matt, don't go with them. It's not what you think. My parents' faces shifted from surprise to something dark and angry, but their voices stayed warm and sweet like nothing was wrong. Sweetie, what are you doing here? Mom asked through her smile, her teeth clenched behind it. You should be at home helping with dinner preparations, Dad added in his concerned father voice, the one he used when relatives were watching. Matt looked between us, confused, his hand still on the door but not pulling it open yet. Mom stepped closer and put her hand on my shoulder with fake gentleness, her fingers digging in just enough to hurt. We're just offering this nice young man a proper Christmas dinner and some help. Grace and dignity for those less fortunate. You know how important that is to our family. Dad nodded and smiled at Matt like they were best friends. We're willing to offer $200 instead of our usual amount because Matt here seems like such a hard worker who deserves support. The doubled amount made my stomach drop because I knew exactly what it meant. They were paying extra to make up for my interference, to make sure Matt said yes even after I'd warned him. Matt glanced at me with apology in his eyes, and I saw him making the calculation. I really need the money, he said quietly. $200 means I can get my car fixed and maybe afford a weekly motel room. I appreciate you worrying, but your parents seem like good people and I've done worse things for less cash. I watched him weighing my warning against his desperation, watched the money winning the fight. His car was parked behind the dumpsters with all his stuff in the back seat, and winter was getting colder every night. A flash memory hit me so hard I almost threw up right there on the sidewalk. Samuel standing at our table, cigarette burns on his neck that he tried to hide with that dirty scarf. His voice quiet when he asked if the kids could leave the room before he degraded himself. My dad laughing like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard, saying the children needed to learn about consequences. Samuel's eyes meeting mine as he talked about foster homes where awful things happened, about the assault under the bridge last week. My Aunt Martha taking notes like it was a college lecture. Then the newspaper photo 2 weeks later, Samuel frozen behind a dumpster 3 blocks from our house, wearing that same scarf. The article said he'd been trying to get into a warming center but didn't have the $25 entry fee. $5 short of what my family gave him for his humiliation. My vision blurred and I tasted bile, but the nausea sharpened my thinking instead of making me weak. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. They're going to make you do what they call the confession. You'll have to stand up at their dinner table and tell them every bad thing that ever happened to you, every mistake you made, every reason you ended up on the streets. My whole family will watch and take notes and ask questions about really personal stuff. My brother will record it on his phone. Then after you've broken down in front of everyone, after you've told them things you've never told anyone, they'll give you $20 instead of $200. Maybe $40 if they're feeling generous. My voice shook, but I kept going. They'll say it's because of what kind of person you really are, that you didn't earn the full amount. My parents' masks slipped for just a second, and I saw real fury underneath, the kind that meant serious trouble later. Matt's expression shifted to guarded uncertainty, his hand finally moving away from the car door. Can I get your number? I'm on break in 40 minutes and I'll text you then to talk more about this. It wasn't a refusal to go with my parents, but it wasn't complete agreement either, and I grabbed onto that sliver of hesitation like a lifeline. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and gave him my number while my parents watched with tight smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Dad leaned close and hissed in my ear, his hand gripping my elbow hard enough to bruise. You're sabotaging a family tradition, and there will be serious consequences when you get home. Mom added in her sugary voice. We'll discuss your episode later, sweetie. You should go home right now to think about your behavior and why you're being so disrespectful. I pulled away from Dad's grip and walked toward the shelter entrance instead of their car, my legs shaking but still moving. I heard Mom call after me, but I didn't turn around. I pulled out my phone and texted Simone, my fingers fumbling on the screen. Emergency. Do you know where Matt usually parks his car and what time his shift ends today? She responded immediately. Behind the dumpsters at McDonald's. Shift ends at 8. Are you okay? I typed back fast. I'll explain everything soon, but right now I need to find Matt before my family does. Inside the shelter, the air was warm and smelled like coffee and unwashed clothes. I approached the front desk where a tired woman with gray hair looked up from her computer. Can I ask you something? Do you know about a family that picks up homeless men every Christmas Eve? Her expression changed immediately to recognition and disgust. She called over her shoulder, Dustin, come talk to this girl. A case manager in his 30s appeared from a back office wearing jeans and a sweater with coffee stains. Are you related to the Christmas vultures? He asked. I nodded, and Dustin waved me to follow him down a hallway past rows of bunk beds and into a small office that smelled like coffee and paper. He shut the door and sat behind a desk covered in folders and resource sheets. He didn't waste time with small talk or try to make me feel better about what he was going to say. He just told me straight that my family had been doing this for years, that men would come back to the shelter shaking and crying but with money in their pockets. He said the shelter staff tried calling the police multiple times, but nothing illegal was actually happening. You can't arrest people for being cruel, he explained. The men went voluntarily because they needed the cash. His voice was flat and matter-of-fact, like he was reading from a report, and that made it worse somehow. I felt sick hearing my family called out like this, hearing confirmation that we were known and hated. The shame sat heavy in my chest, but underneath it was anger, hot and sharp. I asked what we could actually do to help Matt, and Dustin pulled out a resource sheet from a filing cabinet. He said he could offer Matt a one-night motel voucher if he came to the shelter before 6 p.m. today. There was a warming center that charged $25 for entry, but it was better than freezing. Some day labor places opened the day after Christmas if Matt needed quick cash. Dustin highlighted options on the sheet with a yellow marker while I pulled out my phone and took photos of each section. It wasn't a rescue plan or anything dramatic. It was just concrete options, practical steps, things I could actually offer Matt besides vague warnings. I asked if we could call the police about what my family does, and Dustin shook his head slowly. He said they would need evidence of actual crimes and willing victims to press charges. Emotional abuse and manipulation weren't things you could prosecute when the person agreed to be there, even if money was involved. The legal reality was frustrating, but I could tell Dustin had dealt with this before, that he knew exactly where the system's limits were. I sat there feeling helpless for a minute before something clicked in my head. I needed proof of what my family does, something that showed the pattern clearly enough that people would understand. Dustin warned me to be careful about recording people without their consent, but said documentation of my own family's actions in my own home might be different legally. I stood up and thanked him, my mind already forming a plan. I would gather evidence from my family's own records before tonight. The videos my brother kept, the notes my aunt took, whatever else I could find. I left the shelter and drove home, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Back at the house, I checked the driveway and saw my brother's car was gone. He usually went to his girlfriend's place on afternoons before family events. I slipped inside and went straight to his room, closing the door quietly behind me. My hands shook as I opened his laptop, knowing he kept everything backed up to the cloud. I was scared of what I would find, but more scared of doing nothing while Matt ended up like Samuel. The laptop opened to his desktop and I clicked on the media folders. There was one labeled Family Memories right at the top. I clicked it and dozens of video clips appeared, most of them titled with jokes or coded names. I picked one from 3 years ago and pressed play. A middle-aged man sat at our dinner table crying while he talked about losing custody of his kids. The camera angle showed my Aunt Martha in the background with her notebook, writing things down. I could hear my family's voices in the audio, laughing at something the man said. The casual cruelty of it made me want to throw the laptop across the room, but I forced myself to keep watching. I needed to see all of it. I closed the video and went downstairs to the dining room. My aunt's leather notebook sat on the hutch where she always left it between family gatherings. I picked it up and started flipping through pages. Handwritten observations about different years' guests filled every page. Clinical notes about their degradation responses and redemption authenticity. She had documented every humiliation like it was a research project, analyzing how each man reacted to being broken down. I pulled out my phone and photographed every single page, my disgust growing with each click. Back in my room, I put in headphones and opened another file from my brother's phone backup. It was a short audio clip. A man's voice broke as he talked about being assaulted under a bridge. The timestamp showed this was recorded 2 years ago. I remembered that dinner. I remembered being 14 and thinking the man was just very emotional about his story. Now I heard my family's voices in the background asking questions that dug deeper, pushing for more details. I understood what I was really watching back then. I sat on my bed and reviewed everything on my phone. Videos of men crying, photos of my aunt's notes, audio files that made my skin crawl. It was enough to show the pattern, enough to prove this wasn't charity, but planned humiliation. The decision became clear in my mind. I was going to risk whatever came from exposing my family because I couldn't be part of this anymore. I opened my aunt's notes again and found a section near the back titled Philosophical Framework. My grandfather's original justification was written out in her neat handwriting. Earning redemption through humiliation builds character and gratitude. The discomfort is the point. True charity requires the recipient to acknowledge their failures. The academic way she wrote it, analyzing human suffering like a theory to be tested, filled me with cold rage. I copied all the files to a hidden folder on my phone, and then to a thumb drive I buried in my backpack. I lock my bedroom door and wedge my desk chair under the handle for extra measure. The files on my phone feel heavy, like carrying proof of something terrible makes it more real. I sit with my back against the door and scroll through the videos again, watching men break down while my family laughs. The evidence is solid, but using it means burning every bridge with my parents, and I'm 17 with a part-time McDonald's job and no backup plan for where to live. My phone buzzes with a text from Simone. She drove past McDonald's 20 minutes ago and saw Matt's car parked behind the dumpsters where he always parks it. His shift ends in 2 hours. She asks what's going on and if I need anything. I text back fast, my thumbs moving before I can second guess. I explain my family is targeting my coworker, the same guy who works my shifts, and I need to crash at her place tonight because I can't come home after what I'm about to do. She responds immediately with her address and says to come over whenever. I pull up Matt's number and hit call. It rings 4 times and goes to voicemail. I take a breath and start talking. I tell him who I am, that we work together, and I'm begging him not to get in the car with my parents tonight. My voice cracks when I describe what will happen at dinner. They'll make him stand up and talk about every bad thing that led to him living in his car. They'll ask invasive questions about trauma and addiction and failure. My family will record it and take notes like he's a science experiment. Then they'll give him maybe $20 instead of the $200 they promised. I tell him I have a motel voucher from the shelter and $60 in cash if he needs it. There are other options besides my family. I hang up and stare at my phone, hoping he checks his messages before 7 tonight. My laptop pings with an email from Dustin at the shelter. The motel voucher is good for 1 night at the highway place, but Matt has to check in before 9 p.m. and he needs an ID to get the room. Dustin attached a list of warming centers with their addresses and fees. Most charge between $20 and $30 for entry. He added notes in red text saying the centers fill up by 7 on cold nights and turn people away after that. The information is practical, but it shows how limited the options are. At least it's more than nothing, which is what I had an hour ago. I open a new browser tab and search for laws about financial exploitation and coercion. I read through legal websites and forums for 30 minutes. Everything confirms what Dustin said at the shelter. You can't prosecute someone for being manipulative or emotionally cruel if no physical harm happens and the victim agrees to participate. The legal system doesn't protect people from psychological abuse when money is involved. The willing participation part makes me angry because desperation isn't really willing. A memory hits me while I'm reading. I'm maybe 12 years old, sitting at the kitchen table while my mom makes pie crust. She's telling me about the first confession my grandfather hosted back in the 80s. She said he believed homeless people needed to understand their own role in their circumstances, that acknowledging failure was the first step to redemption. She described it like he'd invented something noble and important, this ritual of making desperate people perform their trauma for money. I remember thinking it sounded harsh, but trusting that my parents understood charity better than I did. Now I see it clearly. This isn't just my parents being cruel. It's a generational sickness that got passed down and refined over 40 years. I open the voice memo app on my phone and hit record. I talk directly to myself, explaining what I've witnessed and why I'm intervening. I describe Samuel freezing to death $5 short of shelter fees. I talk about the videos of men breaking down at our table while my family laughs. I explain that Matt just needs his car fixed and a stable place to sleep, that he doesn't deserve what my family will do to him. Speaking it out loud makes the decision feel real and documented. Something I can't take back or pretend didn't happen. I save the recording with today's date. I scroll through my photos looking for something else and find it from last winter. It's a flyer that was posted at the school about the warming center downtown. The image shows their policy clearly. $25 entry fee to prevent overcrowding. The fee makes sense from a management perspective, but it means people like Samuel die $5 short of safety. The systemic cruelty compounds my family's personal cruelty. Too many things are broken, and I feel overwhelmed trying to figure out which problem to fix first. I open my email and start a new message to the reporter whose name I remember from Samuel's death article. I looked him up earlier and found his contact information on the newspaper website. I write that I want to request a confidential meeting about a pattern of exploitation targeting homeless people in our area. I have documentation and evidence of a family that's been doing this for decades. My finger hovers over the send button for a full minute. Once I involve the media, there's no taking it back. The story will go public and my family will know I'm the source. I press send and watch the email disappear from my outbox. My phone rings less than an hour later with a voicemail notification. I put it on speaker and listen to Braden Franks introducing himself. He says he got my email and he's interested in the story, but he needs corroboration and multiple sources before he can publish anything. He emphasizes he'll protect my anonymity if I need it, and he won't publish without my consent. He leaves his cell number and asks me to call back when I'm ready to talk. His voice sounds professional and careful, which is good, but also reminds me how serious this is. I'm not just fighting with my family anymore. I'm escalating this to public exposure and potential legal consequences. I save his number and sit on my bed staring at the ceiling. The evidence is gathered. The help for Matt is arranged. The reporter is waiting for my call. Everything is ready except I'm terrified of what happens next. I head back home around 5, my stomach tight with nerves about what I need to do next. Mom is in the kitchen chopping vegetables for tonight's dinner. The same elaborate spread she makes every year. The smell of turkey roasting fills the house and it makes me feel sick instead of hungry. I grab my phone and set it to record audio, then slide it onto the counter behind the flour canister where it won't be obvious. My hands shake a little as I position it, making sure the microphone faces toward where my parents usually stand when they talk. Mom glances over at me and asks if I'm feeling okay, says I look pale. I tell her I'm fine, just tired from my shift, and she goes back to chopping. Dad walks into the kitchen a few minutes later, loosening his tie from work. He pours himself a glass of wine and leans against the counter about 3 feet from my hidden phone. Mom asks him what time they're picking up the McDonald's kid, and Dad checks his watch, says 7:30 should work since that's when his dinner break starts. Mom reminds him to really emphasize the $200 this time, says I poisoned the well earlier by trying to warn the boy off. Dad laughs and agrees, says desperate people need clear incentives to overcome their doubts. They talk about their approach like they're planning a sales pitch, discussing which details about the dinner to mention first, and how to make the offer sound generous. Mom suggests they park near the dumpsters instead of out front, so I won't see them if I come back to interfere again. Dad agrees, and adds that they should have the cash visible in the car, says seeing money makes people more agreeable. I stand there pretending to look through the fridge while they map out their manipulation strategy in casual voices. Mom mentions that the boy seems like he'll give a good confession, since he's clearly been through some trauma, says those stories are always the most educational for the younger family members. Dad calls tonight's dinner our family service, and they both laugh about how they're helping someone earn their redemption. The complete lack of shame in their voices, the way they discuss exploiting someone's desperation like it's normal dinner conversation, makes my chest feel tight. I grab a water bottle and head upstairs before they notice how upset I look. In my room, I stop the recording and plug in my headphones to listen. The audio quality is clear enough to hear every word they said, every casual laugh and strategic discussion. My dad's voice talking about making desperate people more agreeable, my mom planning where to the park so I can't interfere. I save the file to my phone with today's date and add it to the folder with the videos and photos from earlier. The evidence keeps growing, but I still feel helpless, like I'm documenting crimes that aren't technically illegal. I text Matt again with a more specific plan, telling him I'll meet him at 7 during his break with the motel voucher and cash for food. I add that I have an audio recording he needs to hear before he makes his final decision about going with my parents. I'm not trying to control his choice, but he deserves to know exactly what he's agreeing to if he gets in their car. The message feels pushy as I type it, but I send it anyway. Matt responds a few minutes later with just a thumbs up emoji. I wish I could tell if that means he's actually considering my offer or just acknowledging my text. My phone buzzes with a message from Simone, and I open it to find a photo she took of Matt's car behind the McDonald's dumpsters. The back seat is visible through the window, packed tight with clothes on hangers, blankets, a pillow, boxes of his belongings. The image of him living in that cramped space, working full shifts and then sleeping in a parking lot, hits me hard. My family's offer of $200 must seem huge to someone in his situation. $200 could get his car fixed, could pay for a week at a cheap motel, could mean the difference between sleeping outside in December and having a warm place to stay. The desperation makes him vulnerable, and my family knows it, counts on it. I text Simone back thanking her for the photo and asking if she can keep an eye on the parking lot in case my parents show up early. I drive to the shelter around 6 to pick up the motel voucher from Dustin. He meets me at the front desk and hands over an envelope with the paperwork inside, then makes me promise to text him tomorrow and let him know if Matt actually uses it. He pulls out his personal cell phone and writes the number on the envelope, says if Matt needs help getting to the day labor office or replacing his ID to call him directly. The practical support feels more real than any dramatic rescue fantasy I might have had earlier. Dustin explains that the voucher is good for one night at the Highway Motel, that Matt will need to check in before 9 and show some kind of ID. I ask what happens if he doesn't have ID and Dustin lists alternatives, things like a work badge or a bill with his name on it. The system has so many small barriers that seem reasonable individually, but add up to keep people trapped. I thank Dustin and head back to my car, checking the time. I have 45 minutes before I need to meet Matt. At 7, I pull into the McDonald's parking lot and see Matt coming out the side door in his uniform, heading toward his car. I get out and wave to catch his attention. He walks over looking exhausted and wary, like he's not sure whether to trust me or be annoyed that I'm still pushing. I start by showing him the motel voucher, letting him read the details so he knows it's real and official. Then I pull out my phone and play the audio recording of my parents planning their approach. Matt's face changes as he listens, going from skeptical to disgusted. He hears my dad talk about making desperate people agreeable, hears my mom laugh about how educational trauma stories are for the family. When I show him the video clips from previous years, short segments of men breaking down at our table while my family watches, he sits down hard on the curb and puts his head in his hands. The concrete evidence of what my family does, hearing their voices and seeing the recordings, makes it impossible to dismiss my warnings as exaggeration. Matt sits there for a long moment before speaking. He admits quietly that he's done degrading things for money before, that when you're desperate enough, you'll accept almost any terms. His voice is flat and tired, like he's confessing something shameful. He asks if I can promise the motel voucher is real and there's no catch, if the help I'm offering comes with expectations or conditions. I see how deeply poverty has taught him not to trust kindness, how many times he's probably been exploited or manipulated. I tell him the voucher is real, that Dustin at the shelter set it up and I'm just delivering it. I say there are no strings attached, no expectations. I just need to know he'll be somewhere safe tonight instead of at my family's dinner table. Matt looks at me for a long moment like he's trying to figure out what I'm really after, then nods slowly. I pull out my wallet and count the money inside. $43 in tips and small bills from my shifts, plus the $20 I grabbed from my savings jar at home. $63 total. I hand it all to Matt and tell him it's not a loan, doesn't need to be paid back. I just need him to use it for food and gas, to get himself through the next few days until the day labor office opens. Matt takes the money with hands that shake slightly, folding the bills carefully and putting them in his pocket. He agrees to skip my parents' dinner and go straight to the motel after his shift ends. I write down the motel address and Dustin's phone number on the back of a receipt and hand it to him. Matt thanks me quietly and walks back toward the McDonald's entrance for the rest of his shift. My phone buzzes while I'm still standing in the parking lot. A text from Braden Franks asking about consent forms and whether I can connect him with any of the previous victims or shelter staff who've witnessed the pattern. He says he needs multiple sources before he can publish anything, wants to make sure the story is solid. I respond that I'll ask Dustin about other witnesses, but I need guarantees about protecting identities. The reporter's thoroughness feels professional, but it also adds pressure to get every detail right. I'm not just protecting Matt anymore. I'm building a case that could expose my family publicly. My phone rings and I see it's my mom calling. My stomach drops as I answer. Her voice is tight with barely controlled anger as she asks where I am right now. She says I need to come home immediately to discuss my inappropriate behavior at the shelter earlier. I can hear my dad saying something in the background, his voice raised. I tell her I'm with a friend and I'll be home later. She starts to argue, but I hang up before she can finish. My hands shake as I silence my phone, knowing I just made things worse but unable to face going home right now. I sit in my car watching Matt through the McDonald's windows as he works the register, and I feel the weight of what I've started. I pull into the McDonald's parking lot and back into a space where I can see Matt's car through the windshield. The Honda sits near the dumpsters with frost already forming on the windows, even though it's only 5:30. I watch customers go in and out of the restaurant, looking for any sign of my parents' sedan circling the area. My phone buzzes with a text from Simone asking if I need company, and I type back yes without hesitation. Waiting alone feels dangerous right now, like my parents might show up and I'll need a witness to whatever happens next. Another text comes through and my stomach drops when I see it's from my brother. The message loads with a screenshot attached. One of his confession videos paused on a man's face twisted in anguish. The caption he's typed below reads, "Family betrayal has consequences," and he's added my name with a threat that if I share any files with anyone, he'll post every video publicly and make sure everyone knows I stole them. I stare at the screenshot and feel sick knowing he's willing to hurt all those men again just to control me. The cruelty isn't just my parents' tradition anymore. It's woven through my whole family like rot in wood. I scroll through my contacts and find the legal clinic number Dustin gave me this afternoon, my hands shaking as I dial. A woman answers on the third ring, and I ask for someone who handles pro bono cases involving exploitation. She transfers me, and I wait, watching Matt's car and trying to steady my breathing. A new voice comes on the line introducing herself as Celeste Fulton and asking how she can help. I explain the situation in a rush, talking about my family's Christmas ritual and the recordings I found and my brother's threats. My voice stays level even though terror runs through every word. Celeste asks specific questions about where the recordings were made and whether anyone consented to being filmed. I tell her the videos were taken in my family's home during their dinners, and the men definitely didn't know they were being recorded. She asks if I recorded my parents discussing their plans, and I confirm that I did, in their own house while they talked openly. Celeste explains that recording people in their own home when they have no expectation of privacy is generally legal, especially if I'm documenting potential exploitation. She says sharing evidence of a pattern of abuse with a journalist is protected speech as long as I remove the victim's identifying information. The legal clarity helps me breathe easier, but then she warns about defamation risks if I make false claims. I assure her everything I have is documented and true. She tells me truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and asks if I need help understanding what I can safely share. I thank her and hang up feeling like I have actual boundaries now instead of just fear. I call Dustin back and ask about the shelter's requirements, wanting a backup option if something goes wrong with the motel. He explains they have a waiting list but can hold a bed if someone calls before 5, that they need ID and a sobriety check at entry. The narrow window for help makes sense of why so many people end up sleeping outside even when shelters exist. Dustin adds that if Matt can get there by 8 tonight before bed assignments finish, he'll personally make sure there's space. He describes the shelter rules in detail. No drugs or alcohol allowed. Everyone out by 7 in the morning, back in line by 4 in the afternoon to secure the next night's bed. The structure is meant to keep order, but it also makes any kind of stability nearly impossible when you're starting from nothing. My phone buzzes with a notification from the family group chat, and I open it to see my cousin's message with a countdown. 2 hours until Christmas Eve dinner, and she can't wait to meet this year's guest, complete with party emojis and exclamation points. Other family members respond with their own excited messages, and my aunt asks if she should bring her notebook like always. The casual anticipation of someone's humiliation, treating it like entertainment they're eager to watch, makes me want to scream at all of them. Headlights sweep across my windshield, and I look up to see Simone's car pulling into the space next to mine. She climbs out and gets into my passenger seat carrying 2 coffee cups and a bag of snacks. She tells me she's been tracking my parents' car using the app we share for safety, and shows me photos on her phone. My parents' sedan driving slowly past the shelter, circling the McDonald's parking lot twice, stopping near the dumpsters where Matt usually parks. She took pictures of their license plate with timestamps on each one. We have evidence now of them actively searching for him, stalking him around his workplace. The documentation feels important even though I'm not sure what we'll do with it. We sit in silence drinking coffee and watching the restaurant entrance until 8 o'clock when Matt's shift ends. I see him walk out in his uniform and head toward his car, shoulders hunched against the cold. I get out and walk over to meet him, pulling the motel voucher from my pocket along with the address I wrote down earlier. Matt takes the paper and studies it, then looks at me with exhaustion in his eyes. He agrees to go straight there if I drive ahead and confirm the room is actually paid for and safe. I understand his caution completely after everything he's been through, how poverty teaches you to verify every promise before trusting it. I tell him I'll text him as soon as I check the room and he nods, getting into his car. I walk back to my own car and sit behind the wheel, about to start the engine. Another memory hits me without warning. Samuel's face across our dinner table looking directly at me while he described his trauma. The way his eyes met mine like he was apologizing for what I had to hear, like he knew I was just a kid who shouldn't be witnessing this. I close my eyes and breathe through the image using the grounding techniques my school counselor taught me last year. 5 things I can see. 4 things I can touch. 3 things I can hear. The memory hurts, but it also reminds me exactly why I'm doing this. Why I can't let Matt end up like Samuel did. I start the car and pull out of the parking lot with Simone following behind me, heading toward the highway motel to make sure Matt has somewhere safe to sleep tonight. I pull into the motel parking lot first, my headlights sweeping across the cracked pavement and peeling paint on the building's exterior. The place looks worse than I remembered from driving past it before, but the lights are on in the office and that's what matters right now. I park near the entrance and walk inside where a tired woman behind bulletproof glass takes my voucher without comment. She slides a key across the counter and points toward room 12 on the ground floor. I text Matt the room number and walk over to check it myself, unlocking the door to find a small space with a bed, bathroom, and working heater. It's not much, but it's warm and safe, and that's everything he needs tonight. I snap a photo of the room and send it to Matt with the message that it's real and paid for, and he can come straight here. My phone buzzes with his response saying he's 5 minutes away, that he can see my car in the lot. I wait outside the room watching the parking lot entrance, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. Matt's car pulls in and he parks next to mine, getting out slowly like he's still not sure this is real. I hand him the key and show him where the room is, pointing out the ice machine and vending area. He asks if I'm sure about this, if there's really no catch, and I tell him the only thing I need is for him to be somewhere safe tonight instead of at my family's table. He nods and thanks me again, his voice rough with exhaustion. I'm about to leave when headlights sweep across the lot and my parents' car pulls in fast, tires crunching on gravel. My stomach drops as I watch them park near the entrance, clearly having followed either Matt or me here. Dad gets out first and starts walking toward us with Mom right behind him, their faces set in those fake concerned expressions I know so well. I step between Matt and my parents, holding up my hand. Mom starts with her sugary voice saying they just want to talk, that they're worried about me and want to help this young man. Dad adds that $200 is still on the table if Matt will just come have dinner with them, that my behavior doesn't change their generous offer. I say loudly that Matt already has a place to stay and doesn't need their money or their humiliation. My voice carries across the parking lot and I see a couple near the vending machines turn to watch. Dad's face goes red and he steps closer, telling me I'm making a scene and embarrassing the family. Mom tries to pull me aside by the arm, but I shake her off and say even louder that they need to leave Matt alone, that what they do to people is cruel and wrong. A man smoking outside one of the rooms pulls out his phone and starts recording. Simone's car appears at the entrance and she parks with a clear view of all of us, her phone also pointed our way through the windshield. My parents notice the cameras and their expressions shift from anger to panic, their masks cracking as they realize this confrontation isn't private anymore. A McDonald's employee comes out of a room nearby, probably on break, and asks if everything is okay. She looks between my parents and me with concern, asking if she should call the police. Dad immediately says no in a tight voice, that everything is fine, just a family disagreement. Mom adds with forced lightness that we're working things out and there's no need for authorities. The employee doesn't look convinced, but she goes back inside her room, glancing back once before closing the door. My parents get back in their car without another word to Matt. As they pull away, I hear Mom on the phone through her open window, her voice angry and urgent. She's probably calling my brother or aunt, or looking for someone else to target tonight, someone who doesn't have a coworker willing to interfere. The sick feeling in my stomach gets worse as I realize I've only protected Matt, not stopped the larger pattern. They'll just find another desperate person at a different location, and the whole ritual will continue like it has for 40 years. Matt touches my shoulder gently and says, "Thank you," that he's going to get some sleep now. He drives his car closer to his room and I watch him carry his backpack inside, the door closing behind him with a solid click. I text him that I'll check in tomorrow and he responds with a thumbs up. Simone pulls up next to me and rolls down her window, asking if I'm okay. I tell her I need to go home and grab my stuff because I can't stay there tonight, that things are about to get really bad. The house is dark when I pull up except for the living room lights blazing through the front windows. I sit in my car for a minute gathering myself, knowing what's waiting inside. My phone buzzes with texts from my cousin asking what happened at the motel, from my brother demanding to know where I am, from my aunt saying the family needs to talk. I silence my phone and grab the empty backpack from my trunk, the one I brought specifically for this moment. Inside the house, my parents are sitting on the couch with my brother standing behind them and my aunt in the armchair. The furniture arrangement is formal and planned, everyone positioned like they're conducting a trial. Nobody speaks as I walk in, and the silence feels heavy and deliberate. Dad clears his throat and announces that we need to have a serious conversation about my behavior and my choices. He says I've disrespected a family tradition that goes back 40 years, that I've interfered with their charitable work and made them look bad in front of strangers. Mom adds that she's very disappointed in me, that she raised me to be grateful and humble, but I've become selfish and judgmental instead. My brother crosses his arms and says, I've always thought I was better than everyone, that I've never appreciated what this family does for people. My aunt nods along with everything they say, her expression severe and cold. Dad stands up and walks closer to me, his voice getting louder as he says that tonight I'm going to do my own confession as discipline for my actions. He tells me I need to stand up right now and explain every way I've failed this family, every reason I'm ungrateful, every mistake I've made that led to this moment. Mom adds in a gentler tone that this is for my own good, that humility and accountability will help me grow into a better person. She says everyone needs to face their failures sometimes, and that I'll feel better once I've been honest about my shortcomings. My aunt opens her leather notebook and clicks her pen, ready to take notes like she does during the Christmas dinners. My brother pulls out his phone and aims it at me, clearly planning to record whatever happens next. The ritual they've done to strangers for years is now being turned on me, their own daughter and sister, because I dared to interfere with it. I feel my heart pounding, but my mind is clear, clearer than it's been in days. I pull out my phone and open the recording app, holding it up where they can all see it. I state clearly into the microphone that I refuse to participate in their humiliation ritual, that I consider what they do to homeless people to be psychological abuse and exploitation. I say that forcing someone to degrade themselves for money is wrong regardless of whether it's legal, that cruelty doesn't become charity just because you call it that. My brother lunges forward trying to grab my phone, but I step back and hold it away from him, keeping it recording as I continue speaking. Dad yells that I'm being dramatic and disrespectful, that if I don't stop this right now, there will be serious consequences. Mom's voice gets shrill as she threatens to cut me off financially, to kick me out of the house, to tell the whole extended family that I'm mentally unstable and need help. My aunt adds that she'll make sure everyone knows what I've done, that I'll be cut off from cousins and grandparents and every family gathering. Their threats keep coming and I keep recording, documenting every word they say. Dad's face is purple now and he points at the door, his hand shaking with rage. He tells me to get out of his house if I won't respect family traditions, that I'm not welcome here anymore if I can't be grateful for everything they've done for me. I realize I've been waiting for exactly this, that some part of me knew it would come to this choice. I turn and walk to my room, grabbing the backpack I already packed this afternoon with clothes, documents, my laptop, and the thumb drive with all the evidence. I stuff in a few more things quickly while my family watches from the hallway. Mom is crying now, saying I'm breaking her heart and tearing the family apart. I notice she doesn't ask me to stay or apologize for anything they've done, doesn't question whether their tradition might actually be wrong. She just cries about her heartbreaking while my dad stands next to her with his arms crossed, waiting for me to leave. I walk past all of them with my backpack over my shoulder and my phone still recording in my hand. My brother tries to block the door, but Dad tells him to let me go, that if I want to leave, then good riddance. I get in my car and drive away from the house where I grew up, my hands steady on the wheel even though my whole body feels strange and numb. The streets are empty this late, and the drive to Simone's apartment takes 15 minutes of silence and surreal disconnection. She's waiting at her door when I arrive, and she doesn't ask questions or make me explain anything. She just unlocks the door and points me toward the couch, bringing me a blanket and pillow without comment. I text Matt asking if he's okay, and he responds within seconds with a photo of the motel bed and the word, "thank you." The image of him safe and warm makes something loosen in my chest. I sit on Simone's couch at midnight with my laptop open, pulling up the files I've been collecting all week. The videos from my brother's computer with faces blurred using free editing software I downloaded. The audio recordings with names removed and voices slightly distorted. The photos of my aunt's notes with identifying details carefully redacted with black boxes. I write a statement explaining the 40-year pattern, describing how my family targets vulnerable people and forces them into humiliation rituals disguised as charity. I include the newspaper article about Samuel's death and the timeline showing he died 2 weeks after our dinner, $5 short of the warming center fee. My finger hovers over the send button in the email to Braden Franks for a long moment. Sending this will permanently end my relationship with my family, will make me a traitor in their eyes, and probably in the eyes of extended family too. But I think about Samuel freezing behind a dumpster, and about Matt almost sitting at that table tonight, and about all the other men over 40 years who were humiliated for entertainment. I press send and watch the email disappear into the internet, knowing there's no taking it back now. I wake up at 7 a.m. on Christmas Eve to 3 missed calls from Braden, and a text asking me to call him as soon as possible. My stomach drops as I dial his number from Simone's bathroom, trying not to wake her up. He answers on the first ring and tells me he's already at the shelter interviewing Dustin, that he pulled public records about Samuel's death overnight, and the timeline matches everything I said. His voice is professional but urgent, asking if I'm absolutely certain I want this story published because once it's out there, I can't take it back. I tell him yes, that people need to know what's happening, that Samuel died $5 short of safety and my family is still doing this to people. He promises to protect my identity and blur faces in the videos, that he'll focus on the pattern without naming specific victims. The call lasts maybe 10 minutes, but it feels like I've crossed some invisible line I can never step back over. I sit on Simone's bathroom floor afterward, just breathing, knowing the article will go live today, and my family will know someone leaked their secrets. Around 9 a.m., Braden calls again to verify specific details about the confession ritual, asking about the wine glass signal and the notebook my aunt keeps. I confirm everything while looking at the photos on my phone, the evidence I gathered from my own house just yesterday. He tells me the article will publish late tonight, that he wants to give my family a chance to respond, but he's not waiting long because this is a Christmas Eve story that needs to run now. I drive to the motel around noon with 2 bags of groceries from the discount store and a printed list of resources Dustin texted me. Matt opens the door looking completely different from he did 12 hours ago, his hair wet from a shower and his face less hollow somehow. We sit in my car in the parking lot because the motel room feels too private, too much like I'm intruding on his space. I show him the list of day labor offices that open December 26th, the addresses for free ID replacement services, the phone numbers for car repair assistance programs. He takes notes on the back of a receipt while I talk, his handwriting shaky but focused. We make a plan together, not me telling him what to do, but both of us figuring out next steps. Get his ID replaced first because he needs it for everything else. Apply to the day labor pool the morning it opens. Save money for car repairs so he has reliable transportation. Find a weekly motel rate or a room share situation. It's boring and practical. The real work of helping someone stabilize instead of some dramatic rescue fantasy. Matt tells me about meeting another guy at the motel last night who knows about cheap rooms near the industrial park, that maybe they can split rent if the day labor works out. The cautious hope in his voice makes my chest tight, but in a good way, like something loosening instead of breaking. My phone buzzes with a text from Dustin saying the shelter staff have been quietly warning people all morning about my family's pattern. He sends me a screenshot of their internal memo describing what to watch for. Well-dressed couples offering Christmas dinner and cash. Promises that sound too good to be true. Pressure to get in the car quickly. Several men apparently refused rides over the past few hours, choosing to wait in the shelter line instead, even though it meant staying outside in the cold. One guy told the staff he'd rather freeze than get humiliated for money. The small collective resistance feels significant, even though I know it's not enough, that my family will just find people at different locations like they did with Matt. But at least some people are protected now. At least the shelter is actively warning folks instead of just watching it happen. Around 2 p.m., my phone lights up with the family group chat, and I almost don't look, but I can't help myself. My cousin posted a photo of a different man sitting at our dining room table, someone older with a gray beard and a confused expression. The message says, "Found a grateful guest after all," with 3 celebration emojis and a heart. The comments pile up immediately. My aunt saying how wonderful, my brother asking if they got the good wine out, another cousin saying she wishes she could be there for the blessing. I stare at the photo feeling helpless rage burn through my chest because they just moved to a different bus stop, and kept going, because my intervention only worked for Matt, and now someone else is sitting in that chair waiting for my dad to tap his wine glass. I want to call the police, but I already know what Dustin said, that nothing illegal is happening, that you can't arrest people for being cruel when the victim agrees to be there. The man in the photo looks so grateful and hopeful, and he has no idea what's coming. Braden's article goes live at 8 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and I read it 3 times in a row sitting on Simone's couch. The headline says, "Local family's troubling holiday tradition raises questions about exploitation," and the text is careful but clear, describing the 40-year pattern without naming my family or the specific victims. He included quotes from Dustin about the shelter's awareness, references to Samuel's death and the timeline, descriptions of the confession ritual that make it sound exactly as sick as it is. The comment section fills up within minutes, people arguing about whether this counts as charity or abuse, whether emotional manipulation should be illegal, whether homeless people can really consent when money is involved. Some commenters defend my parents saying they're offering help and food and cash, that beggars can't be choosers. Others express disgust and anger, calling it psychological torture disguised as grace. The debate rages without any clean answers or universal condemnation, just people arguing about where the line is between help and harm. The family group chat explodes around 9 p.m. and I watch it happen in real time. Messages coming in so fast I can barely read them. My brother posts first saying the article is defamatory lies written by someone with an agenda, that our family has been helping the homeless for decades, and this is how we get repaid. My aunt threatens legal action against the newspaper, saying she's calling her lawyer first thing after Christmas. My cousins demand to know who leaked information to the press, asking if anyone talked to reporters or gave out family details. My parents post a joint statement calling themselves victims of a smear campaign by ungrateful people who don't understand their charitable mission, saying they've been feeding and clothing the homeless for 40 years and this is the thanks they get. The messages keep coming, everyone defending the tradition and attacking the article, but not a single person asks if maybe what they do is actually wrong. Not one family member considers that the pattern described in the article might be true and might be harmful. They just circle the wagons and call it persecution. I spend Christmas morning at the city building filing reports with every agency I can find. The homeless outreach program takes my statement and documentation, promising to add it to their files but explaining investigations take months. Adult Protective Services listens to my description of the pattern and says they'll open a case but warns me that emotional abuse of adults is hard to prosecute, that people have the right to make bad choices even under financial pressure. I fill out forms for hours, providing dates and times and descriptions, uploading the videos and photos and audio files to their secure servers. The intake worker is kind but realistic, telling me not to expect quick action or dramatic results, that systemic change happens slowly if it happens at all. I document everything anyway, because even if nothing comes of it immediately, there's now an official record, evidence in government databases that this pattern exists and has been reported. Matt texts me around 3 p.m. on Christmas afternoon saying he got the day labor slot, that he called first thing this morning, and they had an opening for December 26th at 6 a.m. His message includes details about the meeting spot and what to bring, instructions about steel-toed boots that he'll need to borrow or buy somehow. He sounds cautiously hopeful in a way that makes me want to cry, mentioning the guy from the motel who knows about room rentals near the work site. The small forward movement feels more real and solid than any dramatic rescue would have. Just a man getting a job and making a plan, and slowly building stability one practical step at a time. I text Dustin asking about help getting Matt to the DMV when it reopens, explaining that he needs his ID replaced before he can do the day labor paperwork. Dustin responds immediately with detailed instructions about which documents Matt can use as substitutes, which DMV location is fastest, What fees can be waived for people experiencing homelessness? He offers to drive Matt there himself on December 26th after the day labor orientation, to help him navigate the bureaucracy and make sure he gets what he needs. The practical navigation of government systems is tedious and unglamorous, but absolutely essential. The difference between Matt getting the job or losing it because of missing paperwork. Simone and I spend Christmas evening searching rental listings online, making a spreadsheet of possibilities for both Matt and for me. She shows me room share ads near the industrial park where Matt will be working, cheap weekly motels that don't require deposits, efficiency apartments that might accept someone with spotty rental history. Then we search for places I can afford on my McDonald's wages, calculating how many hours I need to work to cover rent and food and bus fare. She offers to let me stay on her couch short term while I save up for first month's rent somewhere, and we work out a basic budget with columns for income and expenses. The sobering reality hits me hard as I look at the numbers, seeing how little money I actually have and how expensive independence is. I'm 17 with a part-time job and no family support, sleeping on a friend's couch and trying to figure out how to survive. But I'm also free from watching people get degraded at my family's table, free from being complicit in cruelty disguised as charity, and that has to count for something even when I'm scared about money and housing and what comes next. Christmas Day, I show up at Pine Street at 9 in the morning for the volunteer shift. Dustin meets me at the door and hands me an apron, pointing me toward the kitchen where 3 other volunteers are already prepping trays of food. I wash my hands and start scooping mashed potatoes onto plates, working the serving line as people file through. Nobody asks me why I'm here or tries to make me feel special for showing up. I just serve food, refill the water pitchers, and collect dirty dishes when people finish eating. A woman named Andrea shows me how to scrape plates properly so the dishwasher doesn't clog. Another volunteer demonstrates the correct way to mop the dining area so it actually gets clean instead of just spreading dirty water around. Dustin introduces me to the regular volunteers who come every week, not just holidays. They talk about the rhythm of the work, how you show up consistently, and do what needs doing without making it about yourself. I learned that respecting boundaries means not asking people their stories or trying to fix their problems. It means serving food and cleaning tables and letting people eat in peace without performing charity at them. The work is boring and my feet hurt by noon. I smell like industrial cleaner and cafeteria food. Nobody thanks me dramatically or tells me I'm making a difference. It feels more real than anything my family ever did. 3 days later, on December 28th, I walk to my shift at McDonald's, and my route takes me past my family's house. I stop on the sidewalk and look at the windows where I grew up, at the dining room where all those confessions happened. My hand reaches for my phone to call Mom, to try one more time to explain why what they do is wrong, but I put the phone away and keep walking instead. Later during my break, I text Braden with an update. Matt started his day labor job and he's saving money for car repairs. The shelter has a new warning system where staff quietly tell people about my family's pattern before they accept rides. I'm staying with Simone and building a life that doesn't include watching people get degraded for entertainment. It's not a happy ending or complete justice. Matt still lives in his car and my family probably found someone else to humiliate. But I'm learning to trust my own sense of right and wrong even when it costs me everything familiar, and that has to count for something. Well, there you go. Another story told, another video made. If you're into this kind of thing, you should probably subscribe before you forget, and then wonder why you're not seeing my videos anymore. I'll be back soon with another one, unfortunately for all of us. See ya!